The old YouTube. There we go. All right. Now I'm going to fix the rest of this because, we got a lot of moving parts here as we get ready on Sunday night. But, Greg, anything shocking happened today other than Dak Prescott throwing for 500 yards in a game that they were never really in?
No, I almost think that's the situation where people do throw for 500 yards is you're down by 1,000,000 points and then the other team just trying to grind out the clock. The Cowboys kept getting the ball back and it was a game it never seemed like they were going to win. Then all of a sudden they had a chance, but they had to throw the ball against a prevent defense for, a quarter and a half. So Prescott definitely was able to rack up a ton of garbage time points.
Yeah, it was that was impressive. All the rushing yards. Baker Mayfield didn't really have to do a whole lot. We had the Seahawks win. Go Seahawks. Russ did not really have to cook today. It was David Moore instead of Lockett. You had Chris Carson doing some of the heavy lifting there. He wasn't even supposed to be here today, and there we are. And now all of a sudden we have a doubleheader. I didn't realize basically until lock because I was so busy doing my lineups and other content and things behind the scene. I didn't know that. I thought that they hadn't rescheduled the game yet. So I had already dropped a bunch of New England players from my season-long teams because I had a bunch of Pittsburgh and Tennessee. So I could have kept them, but I needed kickers and defenses. So yeah, good times.
Yeah, I was expecting that to be a little bit of a decision with season long teams like the dynasty league we're in. I have Tyreek Hill, and it was something I was thinking about Saturday. Is like, oh, am I going to play Tyreek Hill? Am I going to sit him? What's the situation to do there? And then the game got rescheduled for tomorrow, and then it was not a big deal.
Indeed. All right. Well, thank you everybody for coming in here. Basketball tips off in 6 minutes. They hopped out of here a little early so we could jump on air. It's the third. Oh, it's the fourth. This could be the final game, correct? This is game four.
No. This is game three. Game three. The
I
Lakers
lose
are
track.
winning.
Did Rinpack win $100,000 or not today yet? That's what I want to know.
Probably. But here's the other thing also. The Lakers are winning the game so handily. The Lakers might just win the game in they might win the series in 3 games anyway, and then it doesn't matter. They might as well end it today.
Oh, good times. All right, I'm gonna fix this framing because now it's annoying me. But let's see here. What are we gonna do? We're gonna ask you guys to hit the like button, and we're gonna talk about no house advantage in a minute here. Anybody have any bad beats? Anybody angry? Looks like there's that the afternoon games weren't really doing a whole lot. When I last checked here for the scoring, somehow something happened on the last couple laps of NASCAR. I went to from winning 150 to losing $3 to I thought the race was over and I ended up winning $1 and now all of a sudden I'm winning $40. So I'm happy with whatever happened there. I'm assuming it must have been some sort of green-white checkered on that one, but that one's over. We got baseball tomorrow, 2 games there, and we have doubleheader NFL. We will be doing an NFL live before lock. It looks like both sides are really pushing this 2-game slate as opposed to showdown. So we're going to cover it as a 2-game slate. If they posted between now and then additional contests for showdown and get those sizable, we'll treat it from that aspect as well. But let's jump in here looking at our inactives. No surprises. Deshaun Jackson, Alshon Jeffrey, JJ Arcega-Whiteside, and Hakeem Butler, third or fourth string tight end. And then Jimmy Garoppolo, Raheem Mostert, and Daniel Helm were the guys out for here. Let's start off. Everybody's hurt for the Philadelphia offense. Everybody's hurt for the 49ers defense. But apparently defense doesn't matter because they've got the numbers. They've got the odds. They got everything going in their favor, Greg. Start us off here. Carson Wentz. Is Carson Wentz playing for his job like Dwayne Haskins?
I don't think so. If he keeps playing this poorly, then maybe. I know that I think it was FanDuel. There was some sports book that had odds on which quarterback is going to throw the most interceptions this year, and it was actually Carson Wentz tied with Daniel Jones for the shortest odds in the league. So he definitely hasn't been good. But with that said, if they give up on Carson Wentz after 4 games, what does that say about them going forward? I know they drafted Jalen Hurts, and maybe that's something they'd be willing to look to, but I can't imagine they'd pull the plug on Carson Wentz this early. He still has, what's his contract? He's still due a ton of money also, isn't he?
Yeah, I think he's got, 3 years left on it.
With that said, football contracts are fake, right? I don't like, they don't make any sense. The salary cap isn't real in football. The individual contracts aren't real. At any point in time, you could cut somebody, you don't owe the money. You could pay them more money. That means you owe less money against the salary cap. The whole situation is a farce, the NFL salary cap.
It is just. But what do we want to do with Wentz? We have two quarterbacks in this game. The other one is Nick Mullens. We'll get to him, but let's focus on Philadelphia here. Let's see. Miles Sanders, sore glute, but should be good to go. Expecting a full workload. Fortunately, this isn't a contact sport. Oh wait, it is. So hopefully no in-game bruising. But I'm not really so I've got three Philadelphia guys I'm very, very interested in: Ertz, Sanders, and Greg Ward.
That is who our projections like. So I'm not going to disagree there. I will say this also: there's a big difference on FanDuel to DraftKings for this slate. And I mean, we're going to talk about it when we get to the San Francisco side. But
just jump now. Deebo Samuel.
Deebo Samuel throws off the DraftKings slate so much because, I mean, what happened is, so you talk about the inactives there, and the actives for this game are actually more significant than the inactives because Deebo Samuel comes back from the IR, and for whatever reason, DraftKings just priced him as if he doesn't exist. So he's 200, the bare minimum. We've seen this happen before in DFS where somebody's injured for a while and they just get priced down to the min, and then when they finally come back, they just stay at the minimum price, and it creates an issue. So with Deebo Samuel on the slate, he's going to be massively popular, and for good reason, because he's easily I can't imagine where he busts a lineup. You get 0 points from Deebo Samuel. It's not a big deal. He's 200. So if he catches 2 balls, he's the best value on the slate. He's probably going to catch more than 2 passes. So for that reason, you could kind of pay up for whoever you want on DraftKings because you should be playing Deebo Samuel regardless of what his ownership is.
Yeah, and to your point, we were and his name, I've already lost his name. Was it Deontay something? The guy who on Thursday night ended up scoring a touchdown on a kick return. He was like $400 or whatever.
That was that was on last Monday night.
Okay, yeah, whenever that was, yeah, the days mean nothing anymore. In any event, we were talking about playing him, even though we thought he was just going to return kicks and probably he might get a target, but he was so cheap it was going to do everything. Don't worry if Deebo has a full workload or not. If he's in there for at least a third of the snaps, and if he gets 3 targets, blows all of his expectations out of the water. Now, what's going to happen in these giant tournaments, though, that's where you're going to have a little bit of a problem. So let's just talk about Deebo. What do you think his workload is? They said they're going to ease him into the offense. That's much like in basketball when they give it a go, or in college when they give it the old college try. What do you expect for his workload and target potential? I'm thinking 3 or 4 targets is about where I am. So it's hard to get him on FanDuel. And then on DraftKings, yes, well, you can get everything else. If I'm sort of projecting him for, 4 points or whatever, is it worth looking to somebody else for differentiation in the giant tournaments? I'm mostly playing the 250 man.
Yeah, well, we'll say this. Let's see, where is his... He's actually not projected for that. I'm going to refresh to see if this is correct. He's not projected for that much ownership right now. And I don't know if that's just because he's getting lost while people are making lineups at the bottom, but I mean, we haven't projected for 20% ownership right now. I actually thought it was going to be a lot higher until I looked at the latest one. If he's 20% ownership, that's way too low for a guy who's that cheap and that talented. So I almost don't even care that much about his target share, or how many snaps he plays. It's not going to be full, right? Because he hasn't played this year. He's coming off a pretty significant injury. So let's say he plays 20 snaps and gets 3 or 4 targets. I think that's probably the floor for him. And if that's the case, I still expect a decent game. Obviously, there's a little bit of concern, too, that Nick Mullens is quarterback, and he's Nick Mullens. But also the Philadelphia Eagles don't have a good defense. They are 29th overall in defensive DVOA, and that is 29th overall in DVOA. They are 28th in defensive DVOA. So they don't have a good defense, and I don't really care that much. What are you doing with your eye there?
I don't know. It's really bothering me, and I can see myself on camera, and it looks like I've got one eye way open and the other not open very much.
I wouldn't have realized there was anything wrong with your eye if you didn't do something with it, right?
Well, I was trying to see. I was trying to hold it open and make sure it's not.
Should get you a monocle.
I think I'm. Oh yes,
looks fancy.
I would be sophisticated at that point.
More importantly,
let's worry about the game. Let's not worry about. I'll rub some dirt on it and get back in there. No, I'm actually.
More importantly, Deebo Samuel. I say play him. Right. I think at the end of the day, people want to know: do you play Deebo Samuel or not play Deebo Samuel? I say play him. And if this is actually true that he's only going to be 20% owned, and I'll update this more as we get closer to lock. That's ridiculously low for Deebo Samuel, $200.
All right, now that we got see, now I'm putting in eye drops.
There we go. Oh, both eyes. Jeez.
Yeah, well, I have dry
Right
eye
there.
pretty bad, so in any event, there. And no, it's not the Josh Engelman self-inflicted red eye syndrome. But we've got, let's see, Colonel Klink. Yes, thank you. I know nothing. Oh, that's Sergeant Schultz. Never mind. Back to my notes here. Oh, that feels so much better.
By the way, it was somebody posted this in chat. Just so we tie a bow on this. It was Duvernay, the Ravens kick returner. And the other thing that was really interesting about that was the way that lineup worked out was it was a full Chiefs onslaught stack with the Ravens kick returner. So the reason that worked was because the Chiefs won by so many points that Duvernay got a decent amount of opportunities to return kicks, and he just happened to return one for a touchdown. So It's not a lineup I ever would have made, but in hindsight, I look at it, I go, oh, I understand how this worked. The Chiefs scored a ton of points, and just eventually the kick returner got enough opportunities that he was lucky and busted one. So I see where the correlation was there.
All right, so I'm going to drop, he was my number 10 recommended play that night. So we break down each of the single game primetime slates here. Free article, break it down by position, and then write up the entire player pool and rank them. So you can kind of see what we're doing. Keep an eye on FanDuel, keep an eye on DraftKings, call out specific sites for different things here. But the one thing I wanted to kind of wrap it up is reintroduce the Carson Wentz. So no Jalen Reagor, no Dallas Goedert. They're both on the injured reserve. Alshon Jeffrey, Deshaun Jackson, Marquise Goodwin are all out. J.J. Arcega-Whiteside is out. So we're down to Zach Ertz, Greg Ward, John Hightower, and Deontay Burnett as the healthy options. Of course, we know that Sanders is a good downfield receiver. The 49ers are missing Dre Greenlaw, Ahkello Witherspoon, Emmanuel Mosley. They're out. And then on the injured reserve, they have Richard Sherman, Mark NZ, we'll call him, Solomon Thomas, and D Ford.
And Nick Bosa, obviously.
Nick Bosa, yeah, let's not bury the lead there. Thank you. And then the Eagles also are without Jason Peters, who was their, I guess, left tackle at this. He was changing positions. It's a whole mess there. Sorry, Laffy, for this one. So somehow that San Francisco team held Daniel Jones to 179 yards. He did have 49 yards rushing. The Giants were without everybody last week. So this is like a redux of last week where they're playing a team that is incredibly consolidated. I think these Eagles players are a little bit better than those Giants ones just because Carson Wentz at least has experience. But the 49ers are at home. Obviously no home fans, but cross-country, 3-hour time difference, that whole thing. Still a little bit of a home field advantage here. Outside of kind of the big 3.5, because I'm going to elevate Greg Ward up there. Well, and I don't know if we count Carson Wentz as a full, but of their core four, how heavy are you going on those guys? Do you want to dabble a little farther out with say a John Hightower maybe?
So let's break these guys down one by one. We got an hour to kill, right? We got a showdown slate, a lot to talk about.
We do. So. And I see Antoine Murphy saying Hakeem Butler is a far better play than Deebo Samuel. For you guys that don't know, Hakeem Butler's inactive. So I think that's his joke, but just in case you're not looking at that he's not playing. Take it away, Greg.
So Miles Sanders first, and I always say this when we do these showdown breakdowns is I think the best way to go about building lineups is using the Awesemo Top Showdown tool. It's a really good way to look at how we have players projected, their chances to be the top overall scorer, chances to be in the optimal lineup, and I like comparing that to players' ownerships and trying to determine from that where is the actual leverage, where do guys make the most sense. And the other thing also, as we have to keep mentioning, with Deebo Samuel at min price, that also makes it very viable to pay up for some of these guys. So by far, we have Miles Sanders with the best chance to be the top overall scorer on the optimal lineup. We have him at a 28% chance to be the top scoring player in this game. Compare that to a 16.5% projected ownership in the captain spot. Even though he's going to be popular, I still think there's a good amount of leverage there. He's projected to be almost twice as likely to be the top scorer as what his captain ownership is. So I like paying up for him in the captain a lot.
All right. So the strategy obviously is going to be to do a fair amount of mixing and matching in this one. If you want to reach down a little deeper to anybody, would you even consider like a Deontay Burnett? Now we're kind of talking FanDuel a little more because the Deebo makes it all moot on DraftKings. But for FanDuel, Hightower, Burnett, etc. Can you go there half point people?
I wouldn't. I mean, even though we don't have quite the same salary savings that we do FanDuel versus DraftKings, there are some decently cheap FanDuel plays that I think are viable. Greg Ward, you mentioned, he's viable on FanDuel and DraftKings. For FanDuel, I think he's a little bit more desirable just because we're in a little bit more need of the value. But 9,500 for Greg Ward. Like you said, all those injuries on the receiving core they're dealing with, and now also Dallas Goedert out, who has been a key part of their offense early on in the season. I think Greg Ward's in line for a pretty big target share. I think of the players who are priced under 10,000, Greg Ward makes for the best value on FanDuel.
And that's kind of where I've landed. And I've gone to Ward on. So I played all the different slates, through Sunday night on Yahoo. I've got Greg Ward, I've got Sanders, I've got Ertz. On DK the Sunday through Monday and the Thursday through Monday games, I've got tons of Greg Wards. He's 3,900 there, so he's probably my favorite guy. Plus, hey, he used to be a quarterback in college. It's always fun to talk about that. Played him as a quarterback in college, played him as a receiver in the pros. DFS Greg Ward, University of Houston. Great, was a good DFS player there. Zach Ertz, we've seen him basically be a wide receiver one many times when everybody's been hurt. He's no stranger to this. I was looking back. I think he's only had 2 1,000-yard seasons, but he's had a whole host of like 800 to 900-yard seasons, which is very, very solid. And once upon a time, the defenses in the NFC East were generally good.
Yeah,
they're not right now.
No, right now, the defense aren't good. The offense aren't good. The coaching's no good. The special teams are no good. The NFC East is absolutely terrible. Yeah. I mean, since this is an NFC East game, I'm just going to ask you this off the top. Who's the best team in the NFC East?
None of
There's
the
no
above.
Right answer. There's no right answer. There's 4 wrong answers.
None of the above. I don't want to designate anybody. I mean, I guess we'd say Dallas because they have the best fantasy goodness and they like to hand it out like candy at Halloween.
Yeah, their defense is terrible, though. I do think it's probably Dallas. I assume
because the Philly and the Giants are too hurt, and the Washington football team is the Washington football team. They're just first.
I mean, it's maybe the worst division I've ever seen.
Yeah. That's what I think. Okay, so there we go. Rounding into form here. We have what is 8?
So the other thing about the other thing about Zach Ertz is, I mean, you said that he hasn't had many 1,000-yard seasons. Part of that is because Zach Ertz is banged up all the time. Mm-hmm. Think how many times we've seen Zach Ertz leave games with injuries or get hurt here and there. So that's really why he hasn't had massive counting stats over the course of full seasons. If it wasn't for that, then I think we would see some bigger years out of him. Maybe not this year because Carson Wentz can't seem to complete a pass to anybody. But still, I mean, we look at Zach Ertz last week, what he did with the receivers a little bit banged up, was targeted 10 times, ended up hauling in 7 catches for 70 yards. That should be more than enough in this game to be decent, getting that kind of volume. 10 targets is great. So I think that Ertz is definitely one of the better high-end options.
All right, so 40 minutes to go here. Please do hit that like button. It does help us out. We've got, 500 or so people watching, 63 likes. Come on, you didn't give them all to Josh and Rinpack in the last one, I hope. As we begin to transition over here, you mentioned you were doing a little golf betting before the show, so I'm sure you are someone that enjoys using the Awesemo Odd Shopper to help you find things very quickly. I just want to point out, so right now I'm clicking on the NFL odds here. You can search player props, and then if you just type in a player's name, it will give them to you. That's very helpful. You can sort quickly by team. It's a lot of fun. Let's look at passing yards for this one. We should be able to find our guys in this game. So we have Nick Mullens at 265 and a half. It's bouncing around between plus or minus 2 yards, depending on your book. The other one we have, you get a little more wiggle room here with Carson Wentz. He's bouncing around between 232 and 229. If you were looking at those, first let's talk about Wentz. 232, that still feels a little bit light. That's a lot of respect to the San Francisco defense that's missing half of their key players here. Do you think that would be an easy over? And I'm going to put this link in here so you guys can see how slick this interface is. This is all free, by the way. If you are in states where you can bet, if you click on any of these little these little icons, which are the different sports books that we have plays from FanDuel, DraftKings, PointsBet, BetMGM, BetRivers, and SugarHouse, you'll get deals through us because they're trying to get everybody to sign up. And some of these deals are crazy, like, risk-free $500 first bets and other. You've seen crazy ones. What do they do on DraftKings and FanDuel? They're always doing some, the 49ers plus 51, in honor of.
They do that week 1, and then they do other stuff at the beginning of the NFL season, try to entice people. Like bets like, hey, Saquon Barkley over 9.5 rushing yards, then he rushes for 6. So yeah, there's all kind of free bets that win 99.9% of the time, unless it involves the New York Giants.
Good times. But that's definitely something that you want to check out there. It's very, very cool what we've got going on here. All right, let's move on to hit the 49er side. We should be able to get through this relatively quickly. We'll have time for strategy. We'll talk a little bit about no house advantage. And, of course, we'll get to some of your guys' questions. So Jimmy G out with the high ankle sprain. I wanted to point out that Mullens, we've seen him before. He's made 10 starts. He's 5-5 in those starts. That was all the way back in 2018 when he started the last 8 games of that season as a rookie, replacing Jimmy G. I do want to point out, we know that he really, really, really likes George Kittle. Did you know that Kittle's 2 best performances as a tight end were with Nick Mullens as quarterback? He had that 9 targets, 7 catches, 210 yards, and a touchdown in the first half, and then they never went to him after that. In week 14 against the Broncos, and then a couple weeks later against the Rams, he had 11 targets, 9 catches, 149 yards, and a touchdown. He knows the cheat code. Go to Kittle, go to Kittle, go to Kittle. Now, we haven't seen Kittle since week 1, but he's fully healthy. He says he's ready to rip it up tonight.
Yeah, I think Kittle's definitely a decent play tonight. He's not one of my favorite plays in the high end. I'd rather get to Ertz actually to Kittle, and our projections kind of bear that out in terms of comparing ownership. Kittle's just kind of a fair play in terms of how we expect him to be a top performer compared to his ownership. Projected to be 40% owned in the utility, 10% owned in the captain, right about in line with what we think his odds of being the optimal lineup are. So I don't think there's any real leverage to playing George Kittle. That doesn't mean he's a bad play. It doesn't mean that he's a good play either. I just kind of consider him neutral in this spot. Even though, as you said, he has had big games with Nick Mullens in the past, it's still not necessarily, I think, a great thing to have Nick Mullens as your quarterback. So I think that he's fine to play, but I don't think you have to play Kittle either.
All right, here, let's if it's not going to be Kittle, let's stick with the receivers here. Obviously, we've talked about Deebo. We think part-time role most likely. Handful of targets, perfectly fine for us here. How do you feel about, because this crowds things out a little bit with Brandon Ayuk, the rookie, Kendrick Bourne, who's kind of the veteran guy. You've got, I believe Dante Pettis is active, but Pettis, Sanu, and Trent Taylor are all kind of in the mix there. That last trio has combined for about 50 to 60 snaps each of the last 2 games. Kittle's coming back. That's going to impact all of them. And those 3 guys, I believe they have 5 targets combined over the last 2 weeks. So not exciting, really not exciting tonight. So we're narrowing things down. But if you were choosing between Brandon Ayuk and Kendrick Bourne, do you have a lean towards one of them? Or is there some pluses and minuses here?
Yeah, I think so. Brandon Ayuk at 7,800. I think that he's an okay play for the ownership. I think that Kendrick Bourne's probably a little bit stronger of an option. The difference is, though, there's a $2,000 price difference between the two of them. So I wouldn't necessarily leave $2,000 on the table to roster Bourne over Ayuk. But per dollar, I do think that Bourne's a slightly stronger option. And then once again, though, I think that all these 49ers guys, it's not necessarily great for them that Nick Mullens is going to be the quarterback. I think that the best overall play on the team is Jerick McKinnon. I think that he's going to get more of the touches than Jeff Wilson Jr. will. McKinnon did get a little banged up towards the end of last week's game, but he looked really good when he was out there. And I mean, who would have thought we're 3 weeks into the season, and of the starting running backs on the 49ers, it's Jerick McKinnon who's the healthy one, right? We've got Tevin Coleman's out, Raheem Mostert's out, and Jerick McKinnon, who's missed the last 2 years, basically ever since signing that big deal with San Francisco. He's been injured ever since, and now he's the only healthy one. And he still looks really explosive. When he's in the open field, he's making plays. He had, I know it's against the Giants, but he had a couple long receptions. He's broken out long runs at points in time. So I think that Jerick McKinnon still looked really good so far this year. 8,200 is a little bit too cheap for him. If you want to differentiate a lineup and leave salary on the table, I think one thing you could do is you could go from Kittle down to McKinnon. I would be willing to do that to leave some salary on the table. There's also a little bit of inverse correlation between the two of them, because if the 49ers do happen to get out ahead in this game, which is probably somewhat likely, then they're going to be running the ball late. That's a situation McKinnon would be in, and he would probably get a lot more touches than Kittle would in that situation. So I think that McKinnon, just to summarize, is a little bit better of a play than George Kittle on the high end of 49ers players.
All right. So what do you think about Jeff Wilson? So last week, if you just look at their numbers, basically it was essentially this, they had the same production. However, Wilson played 23 snaps and McKinnon played 48. So basically he had double, but the same production. So I guess we give the lean to the guy who's on the field more. And like Wilson had he had a rushing touchdown and a receiving touchdown, and kind of got all his like with 12 or 14 touches on those 23 plays. So he was heavily involved. You've given the upside for McKinnon there. Is there downside? Do you feel like Wilson is going to eat into any of that? And is Wilson viable? Because I think you can play them both. This isn't one of those situations where one's going to benefit only if the other goes out. It's kind of like they are the running backs. That's all we've got. So
yeah, I'll say this, though. I wouldn't play them together. I think they're too expensive to play together. It's not a situation where it's I mean, you look at the Eagles, and Miles Sanders is 9,200 and Boston Scott is 2,800. So that's usually we see from RB1s and RB2s, where one of them is pretty expensive and the other one's really cheap. And I don't necessarily love to play them in that kind of circumstance, but there's a situation where they both could be good for their salaries because one's really cheap and one's expensive. Given how expensive both McKinnon and Jeff Wilson Jr. are, I don't see both of them having good enough games to pay off their salary. So individually, I think both are viable. I have a lean towards McKinnon. But if you're making multiple lineups in Fantasy Cruncher, I would set a rule to not include McKinnon and Wilson in the same lineup.
Okay. Anything else you want to hit on here for the Niners? I mean, it's pretty straightforward on both these teams just because everybody's out. It hurts that some offensive linemen are out. It hurts that, some of these guys that are playing aren't great. But they were asking me, well, what do I think the difference is between Philadelphia and the Giants? Who didn't do well? And I said, well, Wentz is better than Danny Dimes. Sanders is better than the poo-poo platter that they have with no Saquon Barkley. And then, Ertz is better than Ingram. So now you're just down to saying, all right, well, that leaves, now I'm blanking on their names. Their wide receivers, Tate and Darius Slayton. They're just wide receivers. They're not awesome by any stretch. So I think it's about the same, but I have a little bit more belief in Philadelphia. And I think that we're missing, at least one more defensive player got hurt last week, if not two, for the Niners here. So their entire starting defensive backfield their 5 deep is down to one guy now. It's crazy that just the depth that they've been doing this with smoke and mirrors. I don't know how long they can continue.
I mean, it helps if you play the Giants and the Philadelphia Eagles and teams of that ilk every week. One thing I'd say is a little bit of a difference between the Eagles and the Giants is even though the Eagles have a bad offensive line, it's not nearly as bad as the Giants' offensive line, at least per Pro Football Focus. The Giants have had the worst offensive line in the league so far. That's why I've said pretty much any DFS day, I think that you should target defenses going up against the Giants because the amount they turn the ball over, the amount that Daniel Jones is going to get sacked this year because of their weak offensive line is going to always make them a team that's very prone to giving up a lot of points to defenses. So that's really what I'd say the difference is even though both the Giants and Eagles have bad offensive lines, the Giants are on like another level of bad offensive line play.
All right. So kind of ranking our guys. Do we both agree Miles Sanders probably the best play, right?
Yes. I think that he has per our projections, he is the best chance to be the highest scorer in the game. And I also agree with that.
All right. And then George Kittle or Ertz? You're leaning Ertz as number 2.
Yeah, I like Ertz. It has a lot to do with still the difference in quarterbacks, where even though Carson Wentz hasn't been good this year, I still think he's better than Nick Mullens. Interestingly, Carson Wentz cheaper than Nick Mullens on FanDuel, which is crazy. I know Lofty tweeted about that, but that's how bad the start of the season has gone for the Eagles. Can you imagine that I would tell you there'd be a situation where we're 4 weeks into the season, 3 games played, and Nick Mullens is more expensive than Carson Wentz?
No.
So,
I can confidently say no.
But I still think Carson Wentz is better than Nick Mullens. And the other thing with Ertz too is with all those wide receivers out for the Eagles, I mean the targets are going to be so concentrated. It's going to be Miles Sanders is going to get some, Zach Ertz is going to get some, Greg Ward's going to get some, and that could kind of be it. It's going to be really concentrated between those guys. I would be pretty surprised if Ertz doesn't get double-digit targets today. So for that reason,
Okay.
I lean towards Ertz. I think he's probably going to get more work in the passing game than Kittle does, and he's cheaper.
All right. Would you put Ward above Ertz, or is that kind of your break point?
No, I think I would roster Kittle and Ertz before Greg Ward. Although Greg Ward's still a fine play per dollar. I'm just saying in terms of total points production.
Yeah, and we're not going to go through every single player here. These are the key ones, and you can play any 4 players you want, any 3.5 on FanDuel there, but it does start to work out. Let's see here. We didn't really talk about the defenses as a play. Now we only get those on DraftKings. I put them both. So normally on in my articles, I rank the top 10. And then I have the secondary plays, which is usually like five lines. And then I have the lottery tickets. I only had 3 in my secondary plays, or 3 lines. The kickers and each defense got their line, because I actually put Philadelphia ahead of San Francisco, but it's the price that does it. They're not a great defense, but it is Nick Mullens. Mullens does a decent job of taking care of the ball. Basically averages the 1.1 turnover per start. Averages about 2.2 sacks per start. So we say 3.5 instances feels about right. That's perfectly fine. Plus, we don't know exactly what the 49ers are going to do with regards to scoring. You only can lose up to 4 on DraftKings, so it's good to know your scoring system. But they're playing kind of even. And I just think this is going to be a game where there's enough guys that haven't really played together a ton, with Kittle now coming back. Mullens now, under center for week 2. McKinnon, as you mentioned, missing the last 2 years. Rookie receiver Deebo Samuel coming back. Are they all on the same page? Are they flawless? I don't think so. We didn't have OTAs. We didn't have preseason. We didn't have all of that. So could they screw up? Could we see a pick 6? Yes, I think that's a possibility. So that's why I put the Eagles up there. And then San Francisco, if they had their healthy players, they'd probably be number 7 in my picks right now overall. Instead, they're just like they're missing everybody, and they're priced like they've got Bosa and company.
So
I'm making me happy.
I'm going to have a little bit different of a take from you.
Okay.
Number one, also, I generally don't like to roster defenses in Showdown. I think there's a time and a place for them, but not necessarily in general do I think they make for a very good play. Here's why I prefer the 49ers to the Eagles for this particular slate. I think the 49ers are going to run the ball a lot. I think they're going to give the ball to McKinnon. I think Jeff Wilson Jr. is going to get his touches. And it's very hard to score fantasy points against an offense that runs the ball a lot, because almost all of the fantasy points that are scored by defense come via sacks and turnovers. And there's a much better chance of causing a fumble when the team's throwing the ball and a strip sack. Obviously, you can only get an interception if the team's throwing the ball. So because I think that the Eagles are going to be throwing the ball more than the 49ers will, I think there's more upside in the San Francisco defense. The other thing, too, is San Francisco just has a better defense. Even though they have all these injuries they're dealing with, they're 5th overall in defensive DVOA, and that waits for the terrible opponents they've played. So I still think that there's more upside in the 49ers than the Eagles, just because of the better quality of defense and because Philly's going to throw the ball more often.
All right, let's talk about our sponsor, No House Advantage. They've put a different spin on daily fantasy sports. They're offering player props. You've got NBA, MLB, NFL, PGA, etc. It's peer-to-peer, so that means gamers versus gamers. As we've seen with other kind of prop sites, you play the house. Well, here we don't. There's no house advantage, meaning we're not going against the house, we're going against each other. So how it works is you get about 70 questions per whatever sporting event you're going on, and it's player props. It's like, LeBron James points plus assists. Do you think it's going to be higher or lower than 41? And then what you do is you choose 5 questions out of the 60 or 70 that you get, and then you rank them with confidence, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then if you're right, you get that number of points on your lineup. And like if I were playing Greg, then we, even if we pick the same questions, we'd probably weight them slightly different. So there's plenty of combinations. There's a lot of things that go into this. The prizes aren't gigantic yet, but there's been a ton of overlay. And our buddy Spud Kelly, Nolan Kelly, he has been cleaning up over there. Word on the street is. So
yeah, if you follow him on Twitter, he wins every week.
There you go. So that's what you want to do. The nice thing is we have the projections for you at Awesemo. We take all the questions that are listed out each day for where their player lines are. Of course, we're already projecting all these stats. So then we tell you the likelihood that something will be exceeded or missed. And then you can choose which side of it you want to be on. So you're not having to chase all this down and look through a bunch of different projections and adjust a bunch of lines. We've already done it for you. So definitely worthwhile. If you use the promo code Awesemo when you sign up, they'll match you up to your first $20 deposit. And if you refer a friend, as soon as they make a deposit, they'll give you $5 more. So no house advantage. Definitely want to check that out. And they do have an app as well. Very clean interface on the computer, which I like because I'm a computer guy. All right. I have an upload error coming in on my primetime slate. Not making me happy here, Greg. Not making me happy. Fortunately, we have till 8:20, so we're okay.
Oh yes, this is one of my favorite things the shows we do together is when you get tech issues when you're uploading your lineups.
Yes, so this is always fun. So just
it is for me.
Yeah, I know. You're doing cartwheels right now. I can tell. So I'm gonna have to figure out here what silliness I've done, and go from there. So. I'm gonna start over here with my guys, but let's see.
All right, so I'll kill some time here while you're trying to figure that out.
Kill some time here. We do have time to take some questions. We of course will go with premium YouTube, tag Greg and me. And I see we are over 100 likes. If we can get over 125 likes, we'll take some YouTube questions.
Well, nobody's asking questions in the premium chat anyway,
let's take some YouTube questions.
So we might have to take some YouTube questions.
Hit that like button though, just the same. Please.
Do you have it pulled up?
Oh, I was doing my thing. I've got it.
I know. I was just wondering if you had any questions, because then you could read me some questions and I'll answer the questions as you upload your lineups and try to figure out your big CSV error.
That would be perfect. Let's see. The Lakers are getting blown out. I haven't looked. Do the Eagles cover at +10?
I'll say this. I'm not sure. I'm not confident enough to bet. I'm not confident enough to bet on that game. But with that said, should a team quarterback by Nick Mullens ever be favored by 10 points? I mean, that's what I'd say. I think the spread's a little bit too wide. So I would lean with the Eagles side of the spread if I had to make a bet on one side.
All right. Who is the best captain on DraftKings?
So I think let's answer this a couple different ways. First of all, if you're paying up just in terms of who's going to score the most fantasy points, I think it's Miles Sanders. He's also probably going to be the chalkiest play in the captain spot. But as I said at the top, if you compare his projected odds to be the top scorer on the slate that we have compared to his ownership, he's still going a little under-owned in the captain spot. We have him projected to be the top overall scorer in the game 28% of the time, but captain ownership only 16%. So I do think there's a little bit of leverage there in terms of rostering Miles Sanders. One thing that I do think then we could talk about that's a little interesting also is if you're going cheap, who would you roster as a captain for lower ownership, lower price? And for me, that's actually going to be Greg Ward, who's 5,000 utility, 7,500 in the captain. With all those injuries that the Eagles are dealing with and just very few guys that I think are likely to soak up a lot of targets, Greg Ward is somebody who's probably going to get a bunch of them. Not that he necessarily has a substantial chance to be the top overall scorer in the game, but we have him with a 10% chance, which is definitely higher than what people are going to roster him in the captain spot. So Greg Ward, if you want to go off the board with somebody who not a lot of people are going to play in the captain spot, but has a chance to have a big game, I would go with Greg Ward.
All right. Well, my hard handcrafted player pool is.
Oh no.
Well, we're just gonna roll with. We're gonna dance with who brung us. And
so
hopefully this one works. Oops.
What is the error you're getting?
I don't know. I think somehow I must have downloaded some players from the wrong period.
That could have happened also because of that could be a result of the postponed game or something also.
Yes. So I'm good. I just said I had half my lineup, so I just doubled them up. That works. No worries.
All right. Want to read me another question?
Deebo or Hightower? No site given. But I think it's an interesting question on both sides because they're relatively the same price on FanDuel, and then on DraftKings they're not that far off. And now it's what we think the ownership games.
Yeah, so we actually have them projected for the exact same ownership, both of them at 19%. With that considered, I think Deebo's the much better player and the much better value. I would think a little bit differently if it was something like Deebo was 40% owned and Hightower was 5% owned. We have both of them right around 20% projected ownership. With that in mind, you're just looking at Deebo Samuel versus John Hightower, and you're saying, who do I think the better player is? And to me, that's Deebo Samuel. I know it's been a lot of time off, but it's not like John Hightower's doing all that much this year. So to me, I go towards Hightower, especially with there being no real difference in the ownership.
Who is your most owned player on the
Deebo Samuel.
Oh, it is Deebo. Did you go over 50?
I only have one lineup anyway, but
so you win 100.
But if I was, I'm thinking of it in terms of if I was playing. Yes. I usually play single entry for Showdown unless there's a slate I really like. But if I was playing 20, 40, 50 lines for Showdown, then Deebo Samuel would be my highest owned player. So that's why I answer it that way.
All right. Did you put him in captain?
I did not put Deebo Samuel in captain. I don't think there was a need to put Deebo in the captain spot because if you play Deebo in captain. Let me actually try this right now. I'm almost positive at his price. And also...
You leave money on the table, I think.
But here's the thing. If you play Deebo at captain, I think you play the same lineup as everybody else who plays Deebo at captain.
Correct.
Because if you play him at captain, it's 300, and then you have 9,940 for the rest of the spots. So when you plug in both quarterbacks with the highest, the most expensive position players, George Kittle, Miles Sanders, you're still leaving money on the table. So everybody's going to play the same lineup that has Deebo Samuel in the captain spot. The other thing, too, is I just don't think that his upside is all that significant. I just like him as a points per dollar play because of where he's priced at. But because we have some of those concerns about how many targets he's going to get, how many snaps he's going to play after the long layoff, I don't think that he has the legitimate potential to be the highest scoring player on the slate.
Right. Do you want to talk about two 4s, 4 2s, 5 1s, 1 5s, anything like that?
So yeah, I think there's a couple. I mean, obviously, there's a couple different ways. That's a stupid way to say. You could build a lineup more than one way. Obviously, there's not one way to build a lineup. I think for this game in particular, it probably makes most sense to go with either a 4-2 or a 3-3 build because there's not really one team that I think is significantly better from a fantasy perspective than the other. Even though the 49ers are expected to win, I think that the higher upside fantasy players are on the Eagles side of the game, and then I think the better value is on the 49ers side of the game with Deebo Samuel. So either 4-2 or 3-3, I think makes the most sense for this game. There's not a situation where I want to make an onslaught stack for this one.
Okay. How often do you think that? How often does that come into your? I mean, we've seen a variety of different things. I mean, we've got. We thought it was going to be a crappy game on Thursday. Turned out to be just an offensive juggernaut game.
It was a kicker game.
Yeah, and the kickers both got there. Like 2020, it's 2020. That's just what happens.
On FanDuel, the optimal lineup had both kickers, and both of them scored nearly 20 fantasy points, which I do wonder how. I wonder how much people just look at the most recent results and they just kind of say like, "Hey, kickers won on Thursday, therefore I'm rostering kickers today." And I think that like Robbie Gould and Jake Elliott are both okay plays. If you absolutely need to save salary, you could plug them in. I wouldn't go out of my way to roster either of them. But with that said, I do wonder, are they going to go over-owned today just because people are like, hey, these guys won on Thursday, therefore this is the strategy to win. And then some other strategy wins today where it's like a backup running back, then everybody on Monday night tomorrow goes, well, now I have to play a backup running back, and they just keep chasing whatever the last lineup construction was. But I do think that there's a chance that Robbie Gould and Jake Elliott both go a little bit over-owned, which is what we're projecting for also, just because of Thursday's results.
Yeah, people tend to chase things way more than is expected. Recency bias, that's the word I'm looking for.
Yes.
Let's see. McKinnon or Ertz? Is that answer change on DraftKings for you? Pardon me, on FanDuel, does it change?
Yes. Because there's the lack of the PPR points, I think that McKinnon makes for a better play than Ertz on FanDuel. On DraftKings, I lean towards Ertz over McKinnon.
Right, and a couple onslaughts here, and then I'm going to upload my lineups. Thoughts on going no quarterback on FanDuel? Let's see. You go both tight ends. You go both key running backs. Yeah, I'm okay with it.
So that's a situation where I play a kicker. If you're expecting that there's not going to be a quarterback having a big game, that probably stands to reason that there's not going to be passing touchdowns, which means one, you want to have the running backs because they're either going to run the ball in or they're going to be kicking field goals. So that's where I think if you're not playing quarterbacks, you definitely either want running back or kicker from that team.
All right. How many lineups should I make? I've got 69 right now.
Seems like the perfect number.
Oh, plus my cash lineup. I guess that's 70. Damn it.
All
Missed it by one.
Yep, withdraw one.
Yeah, you're right.
Actually, you can't because we're within 15 minutes of lock.
Oh, is that the rule? Somebody was asking me what the rule was, and I wasn't
so
sure.
it's so there's a couple different rules. There's if the contest is full, then 15 minutes within lock, and you can't withdraw. If the contest isn't full, you could still withdraw if it's within 15 minutes of lock. If it's farther out than that, if it's the afternoon at any time, you could withdraw. So that's something I'll do all the time. If I have something come up where whatever happens in my life where I have to go do something, it's like, oh, I'm not going to be at my computer, be able to update lineups. I'll message support in the afternoon and say like, hey, could you guys withdraw my lineups for me? And they usually do it really quickly. So yeah, that's also the easiest way to withdraw lineups is just contact support and say, hey, can you guys withdraw my lineups for me? And they say yes, and then they do it.
All right, they say I'm keeping my winning lineup a secret. I just realized I didn't actually build my cash lineup officially. Let's do that real quick. So who's your captain if you're doing one lineup? Is it going to be Sanders?
Yeah, especially if you're talking about a cash lineup. I think it has to be Miles Sanders in that case.
All right. So let me filter here. DK. And there'll be plenty of pivots off this, folks. So just deep breaths. I think we have to have Kittle in there. I think we have to have Greg Ward in there. I'd like to go with Mullens. At that point, do I go with Wentz as well? Because I still haven't used Deebo Samuel, so then I go Deebo Samuel, and that's going to be the number one lineup, right? On DK.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
But that would you go Hightower or well, people actually leave that much on the table with Deebo. I'm leaving 1,400 on the table, so I guess I did make my cash lineup. I just didn't realize I left that much on the
1,400 isn't that much to leave on the table when it's a one game showdown. So like the other thing to consider too is, all right, Deebo Samuel in 2 weeks. What's his price going to be in showdown? 7,800, 8,200, right? Yeah. So think of it this way. You're rostering an 8,200, 78, whatever. You're rostering a player who should be that expensive for $200. So with that mindset, you're not really leaving that much money on the table. There's just a guy who's grossly underpriced that you happen to be getting at a crazy value. That doesn't mean you're forced to spend that money elsewhere because that money it's still accounted for in the salary cap. There's just a player who's mispriced. So on a slate like this, I don't think it's a big deal to leave 1,400 on the table, even for a cash lineup.
All right, sold. Do you have Sanu's ownership? I'm going to guess he's less than 1%. He's basically the sixth. He and Dante Pettis can fight it over to see who's the.
Yeah, it's less than 1%. And we have his odds of being in the optimal lineup basically 0%.
Oh, that reminds me. The Awesemo Express package now includes all things showdown slates, all things primetime slates. So what that means is for $3.95 a week, the Express package, the NFL style Express package, gets you Alex's player pools, his rankings, the big board for the full slate. What it doesn't give you is ownership percentages and projections, right? But we've said, you know what? People love these showdown slates, and Alex designed this whole thing just to give people who only play 2 or 3 times a week a fighting chance to come home, build a nice lineup that has a chance they can put the kids to bed and watch and maybe win a little money or at least have a sweat, right? That's what most people are looking for here that have the crazy lives. So what he said is, let's make that just a couple bucks a week, and I'm going to add in all our showdown content. So for that, you do get the ownership projections. You get player rankings, you get player projections, and then he's added what Greg was talking about, his chance of a player being in the top 6. Top 5 for FanDuel. And what it helps you understand is sort of like, we're not going to run tens of thousands of Monte Carlo simulations and figure out what's going to happen. Alex is taking care of that for us and said, I've done all these simulations. Here's where I think it comes into play. Now we're taking a 1 game sample size, real life. we don't know exactly where that's going to be. But if this game was played, 10,000 times or whatever, then here's the various outcomes. I mean, I'm sure somewhere in there, Nick Mullens has a 6-touchdown game. I'm sure he also has a 5-interception game, right? I don't know which one we're going to get tonight.
Yeah,
we'll see.
I'll tell you this: I don't want to see Nick Mullens' game played out 10,000 times. That is for sure.
So in any event, check that out. No special promo code or anything. It is just the basic package. So hop on in there and check it out. It is a lot of fun, and you do get Slack chat privileges with that. All right, I'm going to download my file here. This is 8:20, right? I keep checking. I'm panicking.
Yeah, we've got
Okay.
7 minutes to lock.
All right, so deep breaths. Are you going to play any second half games? I did play some last week, or Thursday night, I guess.
It's something that never occurs to me. Like every once in a while, I'll see there's overlay, and I'll be like, "Oh, I should enter a lineup," and then the start time gets moved back. that seems to happen a lot.
Yes,
I do think there's situations though where if you're really paying attention to it and you're looking at the score and you're watching the game, where you could definitely get good advantages on second half lineups, but just by the expected game script in the second half. So if one team's up by a lot at half, then you say like, okay, I'm going to roster the running backs from the team that's up, and I'm going to roster the wide receivers and the quarterback from the team that's down. That's how I'd go about building second half lineups. It's really hard to say before the first half starts who I want to roster in the second half because It depends what happens. There was one slate, I can't remember which game it was, one of the primetime games, where a starting quarterback got hurt right before the end of the first half and got ruled out. And then it made a lot of sense to roster his backup in second half slates. And that was one where it kind of occurred to me. I was like, oh, I should build lineups to play the backup quarterback. So if there's a situation where I think there's value and I'm actually thinking to play it, I'll jump in. The thing is, I'm just always thinking generally at night for these primetime games, I'm looking forward to whatever baseball or basketball slates the next day. And it's just something that isn't really in my mind all the time to look at the second half slates.
All right, someone's asking if Sanders is hurt. Well, the game hasn't started yet. He does have a bruised glute. So we kind of mentioned that at the top of the show, but that is our one concern. Since missing week 1, that was with was it an ankle or hamstring? I forget what it was.
It was I'm pretty sure it was a hamstring injury coming into the season.
So week 2 he played 77% of the snaps. Last week he played 78%. Boston Scott's played 18 and 14, and Corey Clement has played 9 total in those games. I would say maybe he has a skosh higher of in-game injury, so instead of him getting knocked out of the game at an 8% chance, it's probably like an 11% chance now. So yes, there is injury risk, but there's injury risk on every play in the NFL.
Yeah, that was what I was going to say. The other thing too is look at how many injuries there's been through what 3 3/4 weeks of the season now. There's been so many players that get hurt. It's hard to roster one guy over another guy and say, hey, I'm playing this guy because there's no injury risk with him. Like, I don't really think it's a good process because everybody has injury risk. So it's really hard to look at one player and say that unless we know that they're coming in with a substantial injury coming into the game, where it's if it was like a Julio Jones situation, hamstring injury, he's only going to play half the snaps and it could limit him. That's a different situation. We're expecting Miles Sanders to get full snaps. And then if he happens to get hurt in the game, I don't think he's necessarily exponentially more likely to get hurt than Jerick McKinnon, who literally missed the last 2 years because of injuries. There's some injury risk on all these players. We've got like 60% of the prominent fantasy players have missed games already this year.
All right. Tyler says, got to get your lineups in, Emac. They're in. They're in. This is rare. Usually I'm panicking and getting the little red. Your lineups didn't upload. Please contact support.
That was why I had him read some of the questions before. So he was still kind of engaged in the show and he could upload his lineups while I was talking.
All right. They want me to use all 69 lineups. So we tried. Let's see here. Odds are that one of those 69 lineups probably was my cash lineup. So technically, instead of me thinking it's 70, it's because that was the comment build. Greg Ward, optimal captain, not a bad idea. Any idea for second half slate? So Greg kind of talked about those. So here's what I've learned. You got to watch the game and understand the game flow. First off, know who's getting the ball at the start of the half. That's a big thing. You also want to watch at the end of the third quarter and see what's going to happen and who's probably going to have the ball 2 times in the fourth quarter. And is any teams doing sustained drives? How quickly are they running plays? What are they doing? Because you could end up in a situation in the fourth quarter where you get, it's like, oh yeah, I played, Jerick McKinnon, and he's on the field for 6 snaps because it was either mop-up duty and they put Jeff Wilson in, or, Carson Wentz, kept trying to get the ball and score, and they gave up a pick 6, and then they're on the field again. What happens? 49ers are milking the clock. You got to kind of understand the game situation and put yourself in a good spot. I am not confident enough to mass multi-enter on those. It's just too hard for me. But I like to pick just a couple and go with that. Basketball, I have a little more confidence because I know pretty much who's probably going to be closing the game. And that's who you want to build for the second half if it's going to be a close game. If it's a lopsided score, let's talk. We have 2 minutes. We're not going to give you guys any actionable data here on NFL, but let's talk the NBA because they have some big second half contests there. All right. I thought you guys said the Lakers were getting blown out. They're up by 1. It's 29-28. So
well, that's below expectations for the Lakers based on how well they played this series.
They were down by 3 in the first quarter. Anthony Davis has only played 1 rotation thus far. They're gonna be fine, but kind of pay attention to see what's going on here. Is it Kelly Olynyk that's getting the run? What's going on with Solomon Hill? If Olynyk is going into the second half with 4 fouls, or even the fourth quarter with 4 fouls, is he going to be on the court? What's going to happen? And what's the risk of fouling out? Those sorts of things. That's what you want to play for and look at. And it's a little easier to try to game different things out with basketball, in my opinion, than it is with football, because the huge variable is time of possession. Basketball, you still, everybody's going back and forth, up and down the courts. They're going to split the possessions, right? However many there are, about half of them are going to go to each team. Just the way it's going to work. Football, not the case. You get a turnover, something stupid happens, 3 and out, whatever it is. There's way more variance in what can actually happen. So that's why with football, I like to just build 1 or 2 if I'm watching the game. Basketball, I don't have to be watching the game. I'll just look at the box score and figure it out. But as Greg pointed out, they'll keep pushing back the lock time because they don't know for sure when it's going to start. So very rarely do they lock it too soon. They're trying to push it. Now every now and then they'll say, we don't know what's going to happen. We got to lock it here for the fourth quarter, and then they got timeout or somebody scores or there's play reviews or all this, and you're just sitting there going, there's still 2 minutes left. Why isn't my fourth? You get mad, but just don't worry about that. But the final thing I want to talk about with that, there is overlay more often than not. To what Greg was saying. And my favorite is the Pro Bowl, because people in the second half and fourth quarter are still playing people that played in the first half and aren't coming back. I love that. A lot of dead money in the Pro Bowl. That was Pro Bowl, or was it the Super Bowl where they first introduced this 2 years ago?
I'm not degen enough to consider playing Pro Bowl showdown lineups. I don't know nothing about that.
Write a premium article for that. That one goes behind the paywall because we talk a lot about strategy and how to do it, and people just don't pay a lot of attention. But because it's only happened twice so far, this will be the 3rd time. Sort of like Showdown in its infancy was something that was, I don't want to say beatable, but a lot of people weren't doing the extreme correlations that you kind of need to do now to get to the top of these giant field contests. But I will say my favorite contests are on DK. They're called the boosters. So basically, if you get like a 1% score is what it works out to, you get like 20x or something. I think it's achievable. That same 1% score may only get you 10x in a big tournament because they're so damn top end. So I just put that. All right.
We made it to lock.
Any final thoughts as we're here at lock? Hit the like button one more time for us. We'd love to have you get to 200 here. Let's see what we have for content tomorrow. So baseball is back. We have a double header for NFL. So we are going live tomorrow at 10 a.m. That is going to be Alafi and Matt. They're going to be talking about the doubleheader football slate that we have. At 11, it's going to be Laffy, Josh, and Adam. They will be reviewing today's games and tournaments, kind of see what happened, what the different player mixes were, what strategies worked, what didn't work. At noon, you're going to get Matt and Kyle talking about waiver claims for your season-long leagues. Then at 2 o'clock, We've got Jason and Jeff going over golf. At 3 o'clock, Jay Kari and T. McBee, Terry McBride, are going to be talking baseball. And then it looks like at 6 o'clock for the 7 o'clock lock, it's going to be myself and Kyle Dvorak talking about the 2-game slate. We'll also talk a little showdown there, but again, I'm looking at the prize pools. It looks like they're focusing on making the contest really big. I think because the kickoff times are so close together on the opening night on Monday, because the games are going to be going concurrently. On the opening season-long Monday night, they spread them so far apart. They've got time for people to take a breath, get 3 hours, and then go into that big second game showdown. I don't think they're going to do that tomorrow, but we'll see. We'll see. It's 2020. Anything can happen. Final thoughts, Greg, before we dip on out of here.
What else is there to say? We talked about a 1-game slate for an hour. Just addressing the second half contest because people asked about them. Just pay attention to the game script. If there's a situation, just for example, the 49ers are up by 20 points or something like that at halftime, then how is that going to play out the rest of the game, right? Carson Wentz is going to have to throw the ball. That would make guys like Greg Ward and Zach Ertz more preferable options. And then that would make somebody like Nick Mullens a much less preferable option because we'd expect the 49ers to run the ball in that situation.
All right, gamers. With that, you can follow me at Emac DFS. Greg is over there at G Ehrenberg DFS, and it is Awesemo_CON. That, gamers.